Mellow greetings, everybody. My name is James. I'm from the internet, and today we are going to talk about career politicians. Now, recently, there's been some conjecture about the former president, Donald Trump, and what he's going to do next and what he's going to be able to do next. Currently, the House is attempting to impeach him a second time, which would forbid him from running for re-election again. Trump is supposedly putting out whispers about starting a third party, like a Freedom Party or a Patriot Party. So even though he is a one-and-done president, and if for some reason he can escape all this and could actually run for re-election and could become president one more time, that would still be the end of his political career. However, for the vast majority of people in politics, from every level, bottom to top, excluding the president, they can become career politicians. It is not uncommon to see a former congressional representative or senator or governor who has gotten voted out of office to then recirculate and come back again to run for a similar position, either in that state or in another state somewhere down the road. Mitt Romney. So keeping all of this in mind, I was somewhat surprised to see this article on Fox News. Republicans press constitutional amendment term limiting members of Congress. The rise of political careerism in today's Congress is a sharp departure from what the founders intended. What? Huh? What? Hold on, wait a minute. Fox News loves career politicians. Fox News has literally been working with Mitch McConnell longer than Elaine Chao has. Hold on, it gets more surprising, I promise. Senator Ted Cruz joined 5 other Republicans on Monday in moving to restrict the number of times members of Congress can be reelected. The legislation revives Cruz's earlier idea for a constitutional amendment on term limits. If ratified, the measure would prevent senators from serving more than 2 6-year terms and House members from serving more than 3 2-year terms. Yeah, shut the front door. That actually happened. Now, this is not to say that over the last 5 decades or so, there haven't been people who have pitched the idea of term limits. Usually those people are individuals. They get a small posse of followers who are like, yeah, this is what we should do. And then the idea kind of fades away. And it's usually people like, Rand Paul or Justin Amash or, the rare libertarian who likes to be the strict constitutionalist who will spit out terms like, this isn't what the framers intended. But no, lo and behold, it's Ted Cruz. And apparently he has pitched this idea before, so he must be at least semi-serious about it. Quote, every year, Congress spends billions of dollars on giveaways for the well-connected. Washington insiders get taxpayer money, and members of Congress get reelected, all while the system fails the American people, Cruz said in a press release. It's no wonder that the vast majority of Americans from every political stripe, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, overwhelmingly support congressional term limits, he wrote. Yeah, they also overwhelmingly support Medicare for all and legal weed, but we ain't got either of those, Ted. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue. The rise of political careerism in today's Congress is a sharp departure from what the founders intended for our federal governing bodies. I have long called for this solution for the brokenness of Washington, D.C., and I will continue fighting to hold career politicians accountable. As I have done in the past, I urge my colleagues to submit this constitutional amendment to the states for speedy ratification. Senators Marco Rubio, Pat Toomey, Todd Young, Rick Scott, and Mike Braun joined Cruz in his effort Monday. Yeah, when I think like sane politics and constitutionalists, I don't think of names like Marco Rubio or Rick Scott. But lo and behold, they're down with this. Of course, Rick Scott is a politician who has already done the jumping, having formerly been the governor of the state of Florida. Now he is a sitting senator for the state of Florida. So again, no idea if this idea includes not being able to jump from position to post. But again, I digress. Quote, I have long been a supporter of congressional term limits, which would infuse Congress with real-world experience, perspectives, and sensibilities, said Pat Toomey, who has served in the Senate since 2011. Term limits also have added the benefit of being supported by supermajorities of Republicans and Democrats. So you see, term limits is one of those things that always polls well, and then people always say they support it. And then when it's time to pull the trigger on placing term limits on themselves, the majority of those polled in the Senate and in the House, they do the Homer Simpson and they just kind of walk backwards and fade into the bush. Because most people who scrap and scrounge and do all the unwholesome things these people do to get into a position where they could even run for a seat, let alone capture one, don't want to then limit the amount of time they can spend there on the grift. And this has always been the problem with people in seats of power. A 1995 Supreme Court case, U.S. Term Limits v. Thornton, held that the only way to impose term limits on Congress would be through a rare constitutional amendment, of which there have only been 27 in American history. After I read this, I actually went and checked the list of amendments and refreshed myself, and there were a few things of note pertaining to this story I thought we'd hit very briefly before we continue. Number one, the reason why president is the only federal government position that is elected that has term limits is because of an amendment. It was the 22nd Amendment that was proposed in 1947 and got passed in 1951. So it took 4 years of wrangling just to get them to vote to limit somebody else's power that wasn't theirs. And then the second thing of note here is that the last amendment that was passed was 30 years ago. And that was an amendment that Congress passed to ensure that if Congress ever passed a law that would screw with the congressional pay scale, that it wouldn't take effect until the following Congress was sworn in. Yeah, that's it. So this should give you a good idea of where the divided House is on coming together to create amendments that will somewhat curtail their own power. Now, joining Ted Cruz on his quest is Ralph Norman, and he is a seated rep from South Carolina. And he doubled down and dropped this on his own Facebook page just to put it out there to make sure that nobody was confused. Quote, "Term limits ought to apply to every single person serving in Congress, including me." Look at all those periods. I think this is like the conservative version of putting the claps between the words on Twitter, which, by the way, is hella annoying. Will y'all please stop it? Thank you. It's just wrong that someone could make a long-term career out of elected office, especially on the federal level. Some have defended lifelong politicians by saying we need those folks because they know the system and keep things running. That's bunk. What we need are people who serve in Congress for a sensible period of time and then are required to get out. Because with each passing year, the allure of Washington makes it easier and easier to lose sight of your district back home. That's why I've proposed a constitutional amendment that would limit the number of terms someone could serve in the House or Senate. It's also why I've said from the beginning that I'd only serve a reasonable amount of time in the House before term limiting myself voluntarily. Wow, somebody with some conviction who's actually going to walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. I find this almost inspiring, and almost nothing about my government currently inspires me. I reserve the right to change that opinion the second he does or says something really shitty. We can obviously debate how many terms are reasonable. After all, it does take a couple years just to get your feet wet, so to speak. But the bottom line is that serving in the House or Senate should be a temporary privilege, not a career choice. Will this constitutional amendment go anywhere? Are most politicians really going to vote themselves out of a job down the road? Perhaps not, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Now, is there an argument to be made against term limits? Sure, there are arguments to be made against just about anything. The question boils down to which one of them ends with the most net positive for the most people or society in general. Yes, I'm sure it is good to have people with experience sitting in government, but do we really need Dianne Feinstein running for office again at age 91? Should Pelosi and McConnell be pretty much deciding what laws can possibly even get considered, let alone written or passed, for the better part of 20 years? No. But the flip side of that is, for every experienced politician who resigns, you also have a chance of somebody like Lauren Boebert taking their seat. And all she wants to do is walk around on the Senate floor with her gun in the air and go pew, 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 and make shooty sounds. And since I am completely flabbergasted by the idea of well-known representatives in government standing up and shouting out loud that even their terms should be reduced and restricted, and I obviously can't formulate a coherent opinion on this subject because my mind is that blown, I thought I would read somebody else's opinion who has apparently been chasing this very thing down for decades. The idea of term limits for Congress has been around a long time. There's probably no other big change with so much public support and so little chance of being enacted. Politicians, you may have noticed, are not known for doing anything to rein in their own powers, perks, and privileges. So if you have any question about just how far off the tracks we already are, not even 1 month into 2021, after the entire ass kicking that was 2020, well, just know that this guy right here is going to stand on top of a fucking soapbox and scream about something that actually makes sense without any care in the world of what his contemporaries think about him. And judging by the fact that he still insists on rocking that nasty-ass beard, I'm going to assume that Ted Cruz honestly doesn't care what other people think about him. So I guess thank you, Ted Cruz, for going out of your way to try to get rid of Ted Cruz. I want to cheer and punch myself in the face at the same time. Now, I'm not certainly saying y'all should go out and start rocking some Ted Cruz bumper stickers or, t-shirts with that picture on it. If you're going to get a t-shirt of Ted Cruz, make sure it has that picture on it. But regardless of your party or your ideology, you should be 1,000% behind any push to limit the amount of power that people can consistently accrue over time on your taxes dime. So keep your eye out for somebody sane who's supporting this, and then support that person. Until next time, my name is James. I am from the internet, and I am out. Peace.